What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to bring you another one of my 2014 WCQ hat format deck profiles. Today the deck that I wanted to show off is Heraldic Beast. This is a very near and dear deck to me. Back in the day I used to play this deck like crazy. The people at my locals knew me for this deck specifically just because I would do really well with it, especially against some of the meta decks from this time period, which was kind of surprising since this deck never really got that many regional tops or anything back in the day. But it just worked, and nowadays in modern hat format, Heraldic actually has won and I believe got multiple tops in different online hat tournaments, so it's super cool. I'm always a fan of this deck and going and revisiting it, so hopefully you guys will enjoy this deck as well. It has a very cool play style, and so let's get straight into it. So starting off with the monsters, we play 3 copies of Heraldic Beast Leo. It's a 2000 beater on a normal summon level 4, which is really crazy. During the end phase of the turn that it's normal summoned, it gets destroyed, and when it's sent to the graveyard in general, you get to add a Heraldic Beast monster from deck to hand, and you can only use that once per turn. So being kind of a just big beater as well as a searcher is really cool. After that, 3 copies of Heraldic Beast Amber Cronway. This card is also pretty big, 1800, so it means it can beat over things like Firefist Bear, even when there is a Tenki on the field. This one has a really bizarre way of wording its effect, but pretty much while you have 2 copies of it in the graveyard, you can banish the other copy of it in the graveyard and target a different Heraldic Beast in your graveyard and add it to hand. So it's a way to kind of add back Heraldics that are in graveyard, but for the most part it's there also just as a name and a beater, because you do need multiple Heraldic names in the graveyard for some of your other cards. And then we play 1 copy of Heraldic Beast Basilisk. After damage calculation, destroy any opponent's monster that battled this card. So this is a really cool way to out certain cards. And yeah, no, it's just a really solid removal that is searchable. And unfortunately, though, that is all the Heraldic Beasts we play in this deck. This was before we got World Superstars, so there's no of the other Heraldic Beasts that would be worth playing in this deck. There are a couple others out at this time period, but those are the main ones that are actually relevant during this time. This is a very rank 4 focused deck, so we play a lot of extenders. So we play 3 copies of Kagado Kage, 2 copies of Photon Thrasher. I've considered bumping this to 3, but I chose on top of the 1 Thrasher to play 1 Goblin Durberg. There's just a couple times where I've already had monsters on board and I wanted to extend a bit further. So having the 1 copy of Goblin Durberg has been really good, but there is reason to play the 3rd Thrasher, which I definitely will consider more and more in the future. 2 copies of Summoner Monk. You play a good amount of spells, and just being able to get whatever you need out of the deck is really strong. And to pair with the Summoner Monk, a cool thing is I play 1 copy of Star Drawing, which if you've never seen this card before, it can be used as a level 5 for an Xyz summon, which is irrelevant for this, but what is relevant is if it's used as Xyz material. The Xyz monster gains the effect that when it's Xyz summon, you draw a card. So what you're able to do is, for example, go use Summoner Monk's effect, summon this, overlay into Lavalval Chain. It will now be allowed to draw a card and then use Lavalval Chain, dump a Leo. Leo will then add a Heraldic Beast. So it kind of gives you multiple pluses. It's also really good with any of your other extenders. For example, Goblin Durberg, summon Star Drawing, do the same play I just said. Same with Photon Thrasher. Or just being able to normal summon this and then special a Kagado Kage and do the same thing. This card is just so cool to gain small bits of advantage. We also play 1 copy of Traptrix Mermelio just to search a whole normal trap card Also, it's just a good card in general. If you summon it off your Goblinderberg and things, you should be able to get the effect, if I remember correctly, because I'm pretty sure that effect is mandatory. And then the last bit of monsters are just 2 copies of Max C, because gaining advantage in this deck is really good. Depending on how you want to go about the spell and traps for this deck, you could bump this to 3 or even consider playing crows or stuff, but I have been liking this ratio a lot, and in general, I think the amount of monsters and things in this deck is perfect. I have like no complaints almost. Moving on to the spells, we have one of probably the craziest spells, and that is 3 copies of Advanced Heraldry Art. This is why I said you need a lot of Heraldics in grave. What this card does is you target 2 Heraldic Beast monsters in your graveyard, special summon both of them, and then immediately after Xyz summon using just those 2 monsters. So what's crazy about this card is it's not once per turn. So you'll see once we get into the extra deck some of the cool things you can do, but in theory, if you have 2 Heraldic Beasts in graveyard, say your opponent has a pretty big board, you're able to go for Advanced Heraldry Art, make an Honor Arc, detach both materials, take one of their monsters, activate a second copy, and go into another Xyz. So it's really, really strong, really, really cool. Heraldics also have a Monster Reborn-like spell that just summons 1 Heraldic Beast. I've considered playing those, but for the most part, just 3 of this is perfectly fine, and then we're also playing 2 copies of Soul Charge. You go into Xyz really, really easily, and you kind of turbo through your deck. For example, in that Lavalval Chain combo, you went through multiple cards. So really, really good just to have that. After 2 copies of Instant Fusion, just more ways to get into your Xyz as quickly as possible. So that's really, really important. 2 copies of Forbidden Lance, just to insulate your plays going through. You don't really care about that much back row because most of the time you're just extending out. But in general, Forbidden Lance is just a really good card. This deck prefers to side things like MST, just because you want your plays to go through more than you care about the grindy game, because this deck can kind of turbo into Exciton really well. 1 copy of Rhoda to search your warriors. 1 Foolish Burial to send your Leo or any other Heraldic. And lastly, 1 Dark Hole, because it's a good card to clear boards. After that, the traps. 2 copies of Breakthrough Skill. Some builds will play 3 of this. I think 2 is perfectly fine. You kind of just use your rank 4 toolbox for most of your plays regardless. And so you don't have a ton of advantage on board usually unless you're pushing for game. So things like Exciton aren't really a big deal for you. So I just think 2 is perfectly fine. 1 Bottomless and 1 Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare because you do have the 1 Mermail in deck. I chose to play 1 Phoenix Wing Windblast. Some builds will play multiple of this. The reason I chose to play 1 is for the next card I chose to play over it, which I've been testing around with. If you want to play more of this, definitely go for it. It's a good chainable trap, as well as being able to ditch things like your Leo and get searches is really nice. The next trap I chose to play, like I said, I've been experimenting with this, and because of how rank 4 focused this deck is, I've been testing 1 copy of Xyz Reborn. It lets you target an Xyz monster in your graveyard and special summon it, and then attach this as material. So with this deck playing so many Xyz, there's certain ones that I wanted to play multiple copies of, but I couldn't find the space for. And so for that reason exactly, I chose to play this, because it allows you to play through a lot of things. For example, if you get hit with Flying Sea post-siding later in the duel, once you've already made multiple Xyz, this summons the Xyz monster, special summons it, while Flying Sea says that you can't Xyz summon. So this can kind of get around that. For example, if you went for something like Diamond Direwolf, you can bring back the Direwolf and use the effect to pop it and the Flying Sea, as well as, you know, being able to recycle your Lavavel chains or just anything else, even going into like an Exciton if you're running behind. I think this card's really cool. Again, I'm just testing it. If you want to play the second Wing Blast, I would put that over that. Lastly, Compulse, Torrential, and Warning. Nothing new with the staple traps there. Moving on to the extra deck, one copy of Karen Gorgon. Just being able to redirect targeting is pretty cool, as well as it's pretty strong. One copy of number 8 Heraldic King Genome Heritage. This card is so cool. It's the most generic of the Heraldic Xyz for this time period, because the other ones are a Chaos one that you would need rank up cards for. That I do have a rank up Heraldic deck, which is pretty cool, that maybe at some point, if you guys want, I'll put that list up. But what this does is it needs 2 Heraldic Beast monsters, and then once per turn you target a face-up Xyz monster your opponent controls. This card basically gains that monster's name, effects, and attack, and then that monster has its effects negated and its attack becomes 0, and those changes last until the end phase, so it literally just becomes whatever Xyz they have, which is so cool. If, for example, if you go for something like a if they had a Honor Arc on the board, you can just make this into Honor Arc and take theirs. So many cool things you can do with that. 1 King of the Feral Imps to search Kagado Kage. 1 Black Ship of Corn. 2 copies of Honor Arc, again with Advanced Heraldry art. You can basically make double of this if you have double of that. 1 Heartland Draco to steal games. 1 Diamond Direwolf. 2 copies of Exciton for the reason I mentioned before, just usually this card can be live in most cases. 1 Lavavel Chain. This is a card I would consider playing multiple of, but with the Xyz Reborn I think is completely fine. But this is used for a lot of your combos, and the lances help insulate this effect going through, because usually if you resolve it once, you're usually off to the races and doing pretty well. 1 copy of Emerald. 1 Dweller, and 1 Rhapsody in Berserk. This deck can also play Lightning Chidori if you choose to do the instant fusion target being Malavis, because the Aberconway is a wind monster. But I found that it's not really necessary, and I prefer to have the more generic options and not be so reliant on instant fusion for this deck, which is why I'm not playing that. And so my instant fusion target is just Carbonala Warrior. But that is it for this deck profile. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, share it with your friends, comment any questions and things you have, like I said, videos you want to see, and anyways guys, I will see you in the next video.